Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nastaprestu Badrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhakti Nastaki Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshakarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Rasani Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Prasadena Kadrupasya Vinayam Baloki Kurute Shastram Jusva Vraja Vilasani. Good morning, dear devotees. Hare Krishna. Well, continuing our study of this beautiful Srimad-Bhagavatam. Good morning to all the devotees online. Francesca, Shay, Hari. We have 4 texts to discuss today. One is one of those bulk texts, text 1 through 3. And then we're going to read also text 4. So Prabhupada gives a long purport to the first set of texts. I'm going to focus on the second half of that purport. And then we'll discuss the 4th text. And what's happening here is that we're actually beginning a new chapter. So we just concluded chapter 25, which is titled The Characteristics of King Puranjana. And now we're shifting into King Puranjana goes to the forest to hunt. And this is going to extend the metaphor that we've been hearing. The scene, for those that may not know or haven't been keeping track the last few days, is that Narad Muni, the great preacher, has come to King Prachini and excuse me, Prachini is a king wrapped up in the opulence of being a king. But he's a descendant of Dhruva. He's a descendant of a great devotee. And so Narad sees him and he takes pity on him. He thinks to himself, I don't want to see this guy wreck his good opportunity and his family name, and kind of disgrace his lineage by just being a gross sense enjoyer, just being a king enjoying the lavish arrangements, the opulence, material stuff, women, wine, wealth, etc., that a king has access to. I don't want to see him disgrace his lineage like this, especially my disciple Dhruva. So let me help him out. And so he comes to Prachini and he knows if he just right off the bat begins laying into him, so to speak, and telling him you're a fool, you're a rascal, and all of this material enjoyment is nonsense, he might not be met with a receptive ear from Prachini. He realizes I need to deliver this in a different way. And Narad Muni is a wonderful, he's an exemplar of this need to approach each opportunity to share Krishna consciousness with nuance, recognizing time, place, circumstance, and particularly consciousness of the person that's in front of us. What can this person receive? To make it a very simplistic analogy, if anybody has ever been a waiter or a waitress in a restaurant, I only did it once at a country club. It was like an off gig, one-off event, and my buddy knew the guy who was organizing it, and he said, hey, come make $150 for 2 hours, just like taking care of these rich folks for a night. I was like, okay, cool, why not? And so all I had to do actually was pour iced tea and water the whole night. And so there's only one thing to know when you're pouring iced tea and water, and that's how much iced tea or water is already in the glass. That's all you have to pay attention to. And then you fill it up accordingly. And if you overfill, right, if there's only that much room in the glass, and they say they want more, so you have to just put a little more. You can't pour in a whole glass worth of iced tea or water, otherwise it's going to overflow. So the person in Krishna consciousness who wants to share that experience of bhakti with others, we have to recognize, where's that person at? What are they able to take from me today? And Narad Muni, throughout the Bhagavatam, one way of looking at the Srimad-Bhagavatam is as a glorification of Narad Muni, because it's, of course, composed and compiled by his disciple, Srila Vyasadeva. And we hear about the exchange, actually, those of Shay and others who are there with us in our first canto study right now. That's where we are. We just concluded that section where Narad comes and helps Vyasadeva see the importance of writing the Bhagavatam, because you need to glorify Krishna if you want to be happy. So now in turn, Vyasadeva is glorifying Narad. And through the whole Bhagavatam, that's his approach to glorifying Krishna, is that let me glorify my Guru Maharaj also. And so he discusses the so many different ways which Narad Muni reaches out to the different living entities. Dhruva, the 5-year-old, Prahlad in the womb of a mother, and here we're hearing about Prachini Barhi, the materially absorbed king, who at the end of this long extended metaphor gets what Narad Muni is laying down. He picks up what's being said. And so in this section, it's interesting, we're going to hear some elements of the previous metaphor, the previous description of Puranjana, kind of repeated. We heard that the maidservants of the woman who Puranjana has become infatuated with and can't live a moment without until this text, when he decides I don't need her anymore. The woman that he can't live without, when they first met, she was accompanied by 10 maidservants. And those 10 maidservants represent the 5 subtle, or the 5 senses and the sense objects. But now we're going to hear that Puranjana is leaving on a chariot, and the 5 horses represent the 5 senses. In Prabhupada's purport, he'll explain that. So we might say, well, I thought these other things represented the senses, and now these other things represent the senses. The point is that the living entity's existence in the material energy is always dictated and surrounded by these elements of the material energy. These working senses, the sense objects, the mind intelligence, and ultimately the false ego. That goes with the living entity wherever we go. And so in different expressions through this metaphor, as Little Wayne says, repetition sells. And so the metaphorical themes are being repeated through different metaphorical descriptions. And in my reading of the Mahabharata, which is a book that I'm now really like hardcore advocating any chance I get, read the Mahabharata. It's so exciting, it's so cool, and it gives you so much more context for the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam also, just to see the intrigue and the dynamic there. In my reading of the Mahabharata, one of the things that I've taken away is that even Krishna has to repeat himself dozens and hundreds of times to qualify people, excuse me, such as Yudhisthira. We know that Arjuna has his little emotional breakdown at the Battle of Kurukshetra just before it begins, and that's the pretext of the Bhagavad Gita, is that Krishna's preaching to Arjuna to man up and fight. And we kind of take that as a one-off instance until we read the Mahabharata, and we see that like dozens of times, literally, Krishna himself has to remind Yudhisthira, has to refresh their memory. Do you know what these guys did to your wife? Need I remind you what happened to Draupadi? And now you're questioning fighting them? You're questioning this battle? You're questioning your righteousness in this war? Need I remind you? But yes, indeed, Krishna has to remind Yudhisthira time and time again. And it's helpful for me as a community director, whatever leader to whatever capacity, I'm reminded myself that this is one of the main functions of leadership, is simply reminding people of their own sense of purpose. Because we all have a sense of purpose in this world. We all know that wonderful thing that gets us out of bed in the morning, but we don't always remember that wonderful thing that gets us out of the bed in the morning when it's time to actually get out of bed. It doesn't always come into the forefront of consciousness. And so one of the hallmarks of a helpful leader is just somebody that reminds us, oh yeah, that's why I'm here, that's what I'm doing. And even though these other elements have come into my life and these other circumstances are there now, it doesn't actually change my resolute determination to do this thing. So if Krishna has to remind Yudhisthira, then what to speak of myself having to remind whomever, right? I used to get upset, and I probably still do sometimes, when somebody doesn't remember something from a conversation we've had, or doesn't remember why we're doing a particular thing. But actually, this is just the nature of the conditioned living entity in the material world, is that always there's some other shiny object that catches our attention. There's always some other fixation and fascination that the senses get drawn in by. And so to have friends, and leader, whatever, to have friends that remind us, no, actually, you wanted something else. We're here for something else. It's a service. It's a great boon, benediction, opulence to have that element of Sangha, people who can remind us of our real sense of purpose. So don't get discouraged or confused by the metaphorical principles being extended into a different description today. The chariot being now the little container that all the metaphorical elements are kind of boxed into, whereas previously we were hearing about an entire kingdom. Now it's all going to be confined to like what's happening on this chariot, but the purport is the same. And so eventually Prachini Barhi picks up what Narad-Muni is laying down because he gets these different metaphorical elements that are being described. So let me get to the text now. I'll chant the text 4 because text 1 through 3 is pretty long. The great sage Narad continued, "My dear king, once upon a time King Puranjana took up his great bow, and equipped with golden armor and a quiver of unlimited arrows, and accompanied by 11 commanders, he sat on his chariot, driven by 5 swift horses, and went to the forest named Pancha Prashta. He took with him in that chariot 2 explosive arrows. The chariot itself was situated on 2 wheels and 1 revolving axle. On the chariot were 3 flags, 1 rein, 1 chariot driver, 1 sitting place, 2 poles to which the harness was fixed, 5 weapons, and 7 coverings. The chariot moved in 5 different styles, and 5 obstacles lay before it. All the decorations of the chariot were made of gold." So Puranjana is going out on a hunting expedition now. And I'm going to read the text 4 just to kind of remind us why this is a little bit, this should strike us. Oh, Puranjana is doing something that's not with his wife. From text 4, "Chachara mrighayam tatra dripta ateshu karmukha vidhaya jayam atat arham mriga vyasana lalasaha." It was almost impossible for King Puranjana to give up the company of his queen, even for a moment. Nonetheless, on that day, being very much inspired by the desire to hunt, he took up his bow and arrow with great pride and went to the forest, not caring for his wife. Now, what is this forest that Puranjana is going to in the extended metaphor of this story? It's the forest of material enjoyment. And from time to time to time to time to time to time, we all enter into this realm of enjoyment, this forest of enjoyment. Social media is a forest of enjoyment. Right? In my scrolling, am I going to come across a cat video that makes me laugh? Am I going to come across some girl like basically revealing a naked photo of herself? Am I going to come across some criticism or gossip or intrigue of this one and that one? We scroll through the forest of enjoyment. The other day I was in the mall. We were getting something for a gift for Vrindavani's mom. The forest of enjoyment of the mall. All these things I could buy, and do I want this thing or that thing from this store or that store? So these various forests of enjoyment. We hear about how many forests are there in Vrindavan? 12. There are 12 forests in Vrindavan. And Krishna goes to each one of those different forests to enjoy different elements. And the different forests of Braj will manifest different features, different seasons, because in different seasons, different fruits and flowers and things are in bloom, and different atmospheric temperatures, and rain or no rain, and even we heard about snow. Snow is there in the Bhagavatam. This question was there. Shari had asked it on the group chat a few days ago, or somebody brought it up, and Karuna had mentioned Shivaram. Maharaj had said something about this, but actually in the chapter where Krishna takes the clothes of the gopis, there's a mention of snow and how the trees protect us from the snow. So different elements in the different forests of Vrindavan are manifested for Radha and Krishna's pleasure. But in this material world, we look around and we see the different forests of enjoyment and we think they've been manifested for my pleasure. The mall and social media and the party and the restaurant and the club, etc., is for my pleasure. And what animals am I going to find to slay in that forest which can bring me happiness? I bagged a big stag or a wolf or maybe an elephant. What animal have I conquered? What object have I obtained that is mine that I can now be happy about? That's what Paranjana is going out to do. And this is a shock. This is a bit surprising because it seemed just moments ago, just texts ago, the last text of the last chapter was like a paragraph about how any movement, any breath, any step that Paranjana's wife takes, he takes with her. So much attached and so much attracted to her he was that he literally was her shadow. And now the next day, there he is going off into the forest to look for some more enjoyment, because that's the nature of the mind and the material energy, is that today this and tomorrow that. Today you make me happy, tomorrow you make me mad, so I'm going to go find somebody else to make me happy. I'm going to go find something else to make me happy. The PS5 is coming out. These video games are old now, right? I want to shoot people on the PS5. Shooting people on the PS4 is boring now. For what reason, who knows? But shooting people on the PS5 is going to be much better than shooting people on the PS4. So this is the nature of the mind. And Krishna describes this chariot that Paranjana is going out on in the Bhagavad Gita also. He says, Mano Ratha, like Rath Yatra cart. The Rath cart is the chariot that we bring Jagannath on, but the living entity is seated on this Mano Ratha, which is being dragged around by these horses, the five senses, forced into situations here and there that apparently are alluring, apparently exciting, apparently providing some opportunity for being happy, but in the end just bringing suffering. Because once you get that thing, who's ever gotten the thing and then not been happy?
Who's ever gotten the thing and stayed happy?
Yeah, right. That's the exception. Isn't it? You get the thing and then you're more upset, you're more pissed off because I have the thing now. I'm supposed to be happy. It was Christmas time, right? So there's that famous Christmas movie. What is it called? Where the kid like licks the light pole.
A Christmas Story.
A Christmas Story, right? So he is working hard. That kid is endeavoring like anything to get that Ovaltine decoder ring. You guys remember that?
Or the rifle. What's the? Yeah.
I don't remember that. I just remember the decoder ring thing.
Okay.
So the kid is like, Ovaltine is running a promotion, right? Like Davey and I have been watching this documentary about the McDonald's Monopoly ads and how this like mob boss like scammed McDonald's and like got a hold of all the winning tickets and was giving them to his family members. Anyway, it's funny. But these companies, they run advertisements, right? They put like a piece of plastic in the box and then that makes all the kids want that box. And then you wind up buying that cereal or that Ovaltine brand, whatever. So Ovaltine was running a promotion where they had a decoder ring that they would send you if you mailed into them like a certain number of proofs of purchase, right? So you bought like 15 Ovaltine cans. So now we'll send you a little piece of plastic. So of course the little boy he thought this piece of plastic was much more important than it was. And he thought his whole life was just useless until and unless he could acquire the secrets that would be revealed by this decoder ring from Ovaltine, right? Once I have this Ovaltine decoder ring, then all the secrets of the universe would be revealed to me. And so he finally, the proofs of purchase are made and he gets the Ovaltine ring and he's decoding the first secret message from Ovaltine. And D-R-I-K, drink more Ovaltine.
He wasn't even enjoying this throughout. It was
a labor of love. He had to get through the Ovaltine so his mother would buy more Ovaltine so he could get the decoder ring so that he could be told, drink more Ovaltine. That's the great mystery that was revealed by his ardent endeavor. So this is the cheating that's going on with our senses. Sense gratification for the sake of sense gratification has never satisfied anybody. How to reconcile it, because we can't avoid sense gratification also. That's a different side of ugly. Krishna says you got to learn to tolerate happiness and distress. Second philosophical point made in the Bhagavad Gita. It's going to come. Sometimes you're going to be happy. It's not a problem unless you overinvest in that experience. Oh, this is the ultimate. I have to keep this. It can't go away. That's the problematic consciousness. Pain's also going to come. Vrindavan and I were marveling yesterday, right? Who knows? Mukunda Prabhu, without him, who knows? one little miswiring of our thermostat, and we're like living in Siberia all of a sudden. And we're just miserable the whole day. You can't think about anything. You can't do anything except just fuss around worrying about the lack of heat. It's so cold, and it's not supposed to be cold because it's supposed to be warm, because we have all of this sophisticated and opulent technology, and we live in the West in America, and I make this much money, and I'm not supposed to be cold, but I'm cold. Misery is going to come. Happiness is also going to come. So learning to be equipoised in both. That's what the real goal of these descriptions are. I'll read the purport now, or the section from Prabhupada that we wanted to hear from, and then we'll read that second text again. It is herein described that King Puranjana once went to the forest to kill animals. This meant that he, the living entity, came under the influence of the mode of ignorance. The forest in which King Puranjana engaged in hunting was named Pancha Prashta. The word Pancha means five, and this indicates the objects of the five senses. Jayadvaita Maharaj made the analogy once of like a radar. You guys know, like a submarine. And they go, boop, boop, boop. The radar is scanning, looking for enemy objects or objects to avoid, not run into. So the senses are, the mind is constantly scanning for objects to stimulate the five senses. We come into the center, and the first place we're looking is not the altar. The first place we're looking is Prasadam spot, right?
Prasadam altar.
How has Krishna manifested himself today in the form of something with cheese, something with chocolate, something with sugar, hopefully, right? What is manifested for my senses today is really the attitude there. We're constantly scanning for some opportunity to be comforted, to be stimulated. So again, Puranjana is entering into this forest looking for these animals, but those animals are representative of objects that can be attained to gratify his senses. The body has five working senses, namely the hands, the legs, the tongue, the rectum, and the genitals. By taking full advantage of these working senses, the body enjoys material life. The chariot is driven by five horses, which represent the five sense organs, namely the eyes, ears, nose, skin, and tongue. So these are the things that we have set up for us to be able to enjoy that stuff. I can enjoy the taste of ice cream because I have a tongue that can taste ice cream. The worm doesn't have a tongue that can taste ice cream. The worm wouldn't care about ice cream versus a hamburger bun, right? Right. They have something muted in the expression of a tongue, right? But they don't have the sophistication of my tongue, right? So all living entities, 8.4 million species, this is what distinguishes them. One of the things is that they have the sense organs, but manifested more or less in muted ways, right? And we can also see that in our case, we don't have certain sense organs as intensely expressed, right? Like a hawk can see a mouse running in a field from 1.5 miles away. 1.5 miles away, a hawk can see a mouse and say, dinner time. I can't see a mouse like over there in the kitchen if he's scuttling around. So different species of life give the opportunity for the living entity to experience different sense organs in a more or less intense way. The human form of life is unique for two reasons. One, our sense of sense enjoyment is refined to its highest, but also the opportunity to recognize a higher sense of purpose in life is all that window, that gateway is also there. And this is why the human form of life is considered a test for the living entity. What do you really want? What are you going to go for? Are you going to go for the fact that you can eat, sleep, mate, and defend in the grandest of ways? If that's the case, then you become what Prabhupada called just a royal edition of the animals, right? The animal that can, we, us and dolphins are the only animals that they found that have sex for enjoyment. Right? Everybody else, they have sex at a certain time of the year, according to what's favorite, like the ducks and geese over here at the park that Vrindavan and I walked in North Bay Park, where we all went for the parikrama. You notice actually when you go there throughout the year, there's mating season for the fish. You don't know that there's fish in that pond, in that big lake, until there's like a 1.5 week window where all the fish are freaking out. And what are they freaking out about? It's time to have sex. It's time to procreate, because we have to get our the little fish fry. They have to grow up and be big enough to survive the lake freezing over, right? So that we have to have sex at this time so that our babies can survive when the winter comes. We can't have sex in like October because then our babies are going to die. So we have sex in March or whenever, it was probably April, early May. So like this, everybody else in nature enjoys sex, but only for a week. Whereas us humans can ostensibly enjoy every day, several times a day, if we so choose. And if we can't figure out somebody to do it with, then we have pornography and we have all of that whole realm. And so we can absorb ourselves in the opportunity of the senses, or we can recognize that no matter how many times I've done it with whoever, however, I haven't been happy. It hasn't really satisfied a certain itch, which is still present. And let me be concerned about that certain itch. Continuing the purport. The two wheels of the chariot may be compared to the two moving facilities, namely sinful life and religious life. Now it's interesting that sinful life and religious life are on the same axis. They're ultimately in the hands of a conditioned soul who doesn't understand their real purpose of life. Religiosity and sinful life are the same thing because they're being used for the same purpose, to bring them closer to sense gratification. Right? So let me pray and let me offer some charity and let me do some service so that I can get some stuff, some recognition, some pious credit, etc. So that religious life isn't much different from that sinful life in the case of somebody whose motivation is sense gratification. The 5 kinds of obstacles or uneven roads represent the 5 kinds of air passing within the body. These are prana, upana, udhana, samana, and vyana. So again, we've actually heard all these things before compared to other things previously, but repetition sells. So Narad Muni is coming up with new ways to frame these same situations to help Paranjana recognize that, Prachini Barhi recognize that this is always the condition of the living entity. Wherever he goes, that he's surrounded by these elements. And these elements are not actually friendly. They're not actually favorable, although they seem to be. They actually can create, they're ultimately distracting. The word Rashmi, robe, in this verse indicates the mind. The word Nidha is also significant, for Nidha indicates the nest, where a bird takes rest. In this case, Nidha is the heart, where the living entity is situated. The living entity sits in one place only. The causes of his bondage are 2, namely lamentation and illusion. In material existence, the living entity simply hankers to get something he can never get. This is one of those nuggets from Prabhupada. I tattoo this on my forehead. Therefore, he is an illusion. As a result of being in an illusory situation, the living entity is always lamenting. Oh, where was it? Oh. In material existence, the living entity simply hankers to get something they can never get. The illusion of the opportunity of sense gratification, my favorite way of just helping myself be sober about it is to think about the price of a new car versus the price of a car that's been owned for 1 day.
1 hour.
1 hour, right? 1 mile.
Not even just off the lot.
Quarter mile.
Right? I do a Yui. I come back to say a new car costs $25,000. The car that's been owned for even a moment by someone else, driven less than a mile, turned around and said, I don't like this one, the color's not good, my wife hates it, whatever. Now that car costs at least $5,000 less, at least 20 to 25% less than when it was brand new. Now what has happened? Has the car's actual physical components been degraded 25%? There's no scratches, there's no stains, the new car smell is still there. But what has been lost is that false idea, that premise, that idea of sovereignty, that this is mine and mine alone. No one else has had this except for me. Now someone else has owned this before. I'm chewing the chew. I'm taking second best. Therefore, it costs thousands less. And every year, somehow or other, literally hundreds of thousands of people buy brand new cars. Despite basically the same car being available for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 less, they buy the brand new car. This is the living entity hankering after that experience which we cannot have, but we think and spend our life trying to achieve through sense gratification. The living entity carries out various desires through 5 different processes, which indicate the working of the 5 working senses. The golden ornaments and dress indicate that the living entity is influenced by the quality of rajagun, passion. One who has a good deal of money or riches is especially driven by the mode of passion. There's a sense of entitlement that you get. When you get a little money in your pocket, you're like, oh yeah, now we can do some things. Now we can make some things happen. The world has opened up to us. The world is my oyster now. And we start to look, everything takes on a different vision. You realize, oh, I could get that. I could get that. That could be mine. That'd be kind of nice to have. I never thought about this. So the influence of Rajagun is like that sense of possibility that keeps the living entity distracted from our real purpose. And it's dangerous. It's literally intoxicating. Wealth, power, influence in this world puts us into all kinds of circumstances we never thought we would do until we get that possibility. We wouldn't do it because we couldn't do it. We don't learn that until we can do it, and then we do it, and then we feel bad. Then we regret. The 11 commanders represent the 10 senses and the mind. The mind is always making plans with the 10 commanders to enjoy the material world. The forest named Panchaprash, where the king went to hunt, is the forest of the 5 sense objects: form, taste, sound, smell, and touch. Thus, in these 3 verses, Narada Muni describes the position of the material body and the engagement of the living entity within it. It all does circle back to this. If we want to be a little introspective, we should look at how we're always making these plans that Srila Prabhupada just referenced in the purport. The mind always has some plan to enjoy with the senses. And we have to if we want to really have the rubber meet the road in terms of transforming our consciousness, we have to start to make plans to serve Krishna instead of making plans to serve our senses. Because the mind is going to make plans. That's the nature of the situation. But am I making plans to serve Krishna? So with Ujjval Prabhu and Kishore and I, we have a plan this evening to read from the 10th canto together. And it's nice. We enjoy that. Right, Plan still on? We enjoy this reading. We're looking forward to hearing about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. That's what happens in the 10th canto. That's the life and soul of our Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. Dristum Vraja Vilasini. These Vraj Vilas, these Leelas of the Lord in Vrindavan. That's something to hanker after. So we have a plan, and we're looking forward to that. Not going to the movie, not checking out the new restaurant, but hearing about the Leela of Krishna in Vrindavan. So it's a plan, and it's something that our senses are anticipating. But as far as we could say, we could give ourselves a little bit of credit that it's our transcendental senses. It's our hope of hoping to experience our transcendental senses that has us looking forward to that opportunity to do some reading this evening. These are the kinds of plans to make. Gary and Miranda are taking on Gora's Grow, and they're going to be distributing prasadam in mass. It takes a lot of planning. So much logistics goes into distributing prasadam by running a restaurant, right? So much so that you're not going to have time for much else. There's no more time for zoning out and video games and Magic the Gathering conferences, etc. You just don't have time for such things when you're distributing prasadam via a restaurant. So to occupy and satisfy our plan-making propensities with detailed and absorbing engagements in Krishna service, that's the antidote. This is why Prabhupada, in his famous letter to Purandar Prabhu, who by all accounts was a brilliant devotee, but had a tendency towards trying to kind of centralize and bureaucratize things. He wanted to kind of make ISKCON a heavier institution than it was, in the name of simplifying things. Prabhupada was vehemently opposed to this. And he wanted to see, and in this letter in 1972 in December, Prabhupada writes, it's the responsibility of the leadership to make sure that each devotee has a sense of fresh challenge. Fresh challenges have to be presented to the devotees, and this is the secret for engaging them in Krishna consciousness. Because we're looking for that opportunity to hunt, that opportunity to show our prowess. It's unavoidable to try, especially in the West, to try to extricate that from our sense of identity is impossible. Prabhupada didn't try to do it with his disciples. He simply said, do something wonderful for Krishna. To Shyama-Sundar in 1971 in Mumbai, Prabhupada said, what is the use of being an American if you don't do something wonderful? And from that challenge that Prabhupada laid down there, we have the Cross Maidan Festival, which is where Raghunath Maharaj met the devotees. This is where Mother Vishaka became a serious devotee. Many other devotees met Srila Prabhupada at this Cross Maidan Festival. Literally 20,000 people a day were coming, taking prasad, hearing katha, hearing kirtan. What is the use of being an American if you don't do something wonderful? So our life is for making plans still. Don't give up that tendency, but make plans for Krishna and execute them. And you'll feel that that satisfaction, that fulfillment that Prabhupada said, we're always looking for the material energy and never finding. Okay, so I'll finish up there. That's all I wanted to share. Are there any comments or questions, or anybody online have something they would like to add? Yes, Miranda.
I was appreciating when you were talking about like the 4 or 5 horses.
5 horses, yeah.
5 horses. It reminded me when Brother Schubert did that presentation when we all were horses.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
That was fun. And, you know, it was with Gore's Grill, I was trying to think, like, why now?
Mm.
Like, what's Christian? What do you
What's
up to?
going on? Yeah.
Yeah, and I had realization between this morning and now, part of a realization that I'm kind of a lousy stay-at-home wife. Like, I worked my whole life. I've been working since I was like 14, even before that, like under the table places. And so now I'm like flipped the script so like drastically. My brain like can't like wrap around like, you don't go to work. You work here now, and like you don't have a boss telling you what to do. He just
You can do anything you want.
and it's just too much room.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate how like I keep thinking of it as like every day we're attempting to pray for service. And it's like, oh Lord, oh Angie, the Lord, please engage me in your service. And it's like, well, you kind of asked for it.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
every day I'm asking for service, and now it's like presented in this way. It's like Krishna really is like taking care in so many different ways. And even when I can't take care of myself, and when I can't make the right decision to just do what I need to do in my ashram, my grahast ashram ish, and keep things clean and take care of my husband, it's just a headache. But now just the thought of like going back to work, and then doing that with Gary together, like having that, it just seems so. My brain's like, oh, okay, I can breathe. Yeah, so I like that the brain left its own devices is scary. So Krishna coming in clutch is
giving
very
some context
favorable.
which you can do something healthy in. Yeah, it's a beautiful comment. Prabhupada has a nice introspection. Thank you. Another nugget, a gem from Prabhupada's purports. One should coordinate their service with the pace of the plan of the Lord. Right? That Krishna has his time for things. Again, since we're in Detroit, and car analogies, I like to think about the assembly line. And everyone wants to put the steering wheel on, so to speak, like the cherry on top. And I have the steering wheel. But unless the rivets go into the frame of the car way down at the beginning of the assembly line, then the steering wheel is going to be useless. It's not going to be a car that can drive. So if I'm standing there with the steering wheel, but it's really time to put a rivet in, then I'm not a servant. Actually, I'm not helping the process. So in the manifestation of Mahaprabhu's movement, we might say that things should be this way. Right? But how are things actually? Where is my community? Where is my society? Where am I as a devotee? What's the next step to take? What's the next process on that assembly line of the society of Mahaprabhu's devotees that I can contribute to? And recognizing that, embracing that, and going for it. And if we're introspective in this way, in my experience and what Miranda's testifying also, you'll find, wow, this is perfect. This is exactly what I need when I needed it. Krishna knew, and he set it up. And if I follow through, sure enough, there'll be something even more exciting on the other side. Right? We can't even know to want what Krishna has coming down the pipeline. because what he has coming down the pipeline is manifesting exclusively from him and the internal reality. And we're still rolling around in our confused conception, sometimes spiritual, sometimes material. So to learn to align ourselves in the way that you're speaking about is a sign of maturity. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Yeah, Bishmaji.
And I really appreciate how concisely and simply you're able to extract points. And I feel like it's really something Prabhupada really shined in terms of, and continues to through his books and all that. But I was hearing a lecture this morning on Bhagavad Gita where Prabhupada was touching on that point and just saying how, when you're engaged in Krishna consciousness, like there's no question of Maya. Like in terms, like if you're spent.
There's just no
So
room.
to speak, there's no room. And Prabhupada gave the example of light and darkness. So I just wanted to bring that out also, just how when there's light, there's no question of darkness. So just going for the light.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And that's our solution is a positive one ultimately. This section is a little, it's tempting to get into the Gyan Yoga kind of rejection of the material energy vibe, but that's really not our process. It's helpful to know the danger on the road, that there's a curb coming up, there's a speed bump there's a pothole here that they still haven't fixed. It's good to know those things, but the purpose of driving is not to avoid the obstacles. The purpose of driving is to get to the destination. So we should know the destination. We should know how to drive the road confidently. Going forward means increasing our service, making plans for that. And as to give another example Prabhupada gave of that dynamic, that as I increase my service, naturally my opportunity for sense gratification diminishes. As he said that if you have a glass of milk that's totally full, if you drop ink on that milk glass, the ink will roll off. By physics, there's a process called capillary action. And so when liquid is in a container, there's a kind of critical mass of that liquid, which creates a little bit of like a curve, like a
Dome.
Yeah, dome. Thank you. I was going to say contact lens. So it creates a little bit of a dome on the top. And all those liquid particles are so perfectly packed up together and contained by the container that it makes look like a little dome. And when the ink is dropped on, the ink rolls away. It can't penetrate in because there's no room to go in. And all the liquid is made into almost like a solid thing by its perfect filling within that container. So this is what we're doing with our Krishna consciousness also, that we have this material body, it's a container, it's a vehicle, and we're filling it up with devotional service. And if it's filled up in a healthy way, then when Maya comes, when that ink drop comes, which it does in this material world, there's always something coming to harass us. It won't be able to penetrate. It won't be able to get in because I don't have time for that. I can't allow that influence to come in because the devotees, because my service, because my attraction for Krishna just won't allow it. Thank you for highlighting that point. Anybody else? Any comments or questions? Hi, well, Mother Renata, glad you're with us. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Rantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Hi, Gaur Premanandi. Vanchakalpa Tribhishya, Kriti Sriviya Vichar, Titanam, Avanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha.